Okay, good evening councillors, good evening officers, good evening to anybody online and listening in. Welcome to this evening's Overview and Scrutiny Committee meeting held here at the Town Hall in Bexhill. First item on the agenda are the minutes. Do I have your authorisation as chairman to sign the minutes of the meeting held at this committee on the 18th of November 2024 as a correct record of those proceedings?
So move.
Agreed. That's agreed. Thank you very much. Apologies and substitutions. Don't believe there are any.
Yeah, none received, Chair.
Thank you. Additional agenda items, there are none. I think that's right. We have two members join us online, Councillor McGurk and Councillor Maynard from this committee. Disclosure of interest and dispensations. Any members have any disclosure of interest they feel they need to make on any items on the agenda? Councillor Court.
Thank you, Chair. I'm disclosing interest as a member of Bexhill Community Land Trust for items 5 and 6 on the agenda.
Thank you. Councillor Byrne.
Not too sure whether it's relevant to any item, but just in case, member of Bexhill Town Council.
Okie dokie. Oh, there we go.
The same reason, but for Rye Town Council.
Okay. Yeah. Oh, another one. Town Council. Battle Town Council. Right. Item 5, public. What have we got there? I've got online, I've got Councillor Maynard as number 1. So Councillor Maynard, that's East Sussex County Council.
Thank you very much indeed. Indeed, just in case everybody goes off piste, I mean, it could transpire that East Sussex County Council is mentioned in pretty much any agenda item this evening. So I'll just make the standard personal, not prejudicial interest as an executive member of East Sussex County Council. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor McGurk is down as number 2.
Thanks, Chair. As a director of Rother Housing Company.
Thank you. And Councillor Cooper. You're muted, Councillor.
Sorry, I'm a parish councillor for Westfield and Sedlescombe and a director of the housing company.
Okie dokie, thank you. And
thank you, Chair. My apologies for lateness as Chair of the Rother District Housing Company. Thank you.
Thank you. Right, hopefully that's it. It's just about everybody. Right, public consultation on the draft housing development strategy. This is a report of Joe Powell, sat next to me. Purpose of this report, to share the draft housing development strategy produced in collaboration with the Housing Development Task and Finish Group to secure from the overview from this committee a recommendation that Cabinet approve the draft housing development strategy for public consultation. Recommendation is that we, as this committee, recommends it to Cabinet for approval a public consultation exercise on the draft housing development strategy. And the reason for that is to allow proper consultation to take place. So that's it. What I'm going to say is thanks to those councillors who have served on said Housing Task and Finish Group, which is Councillor John Barnes, who was a chairman, Councillor Tony Biggs, Councillor Cheryl Creaser, Councillor Tim Groner, Councillor Chaz Pearce and Councillor Connor Winter. So I wanted to make sure they were honoured, if you like, with a mention. So go on for that, down to Joe. Oh, Graham, you're going to introduce. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So I'll take you through this strategy today. Our housing development strategy builds on the good work of the predecessor housing homelessness and rough sweeping strategy, which has recently come to the end of its working period. We kicked off the work towards a housing development strategy at our housing development event that I hope a lot of you will remember, and many of you were at in January 2024. Many members were there, parish councils, other stakeholders, registered providers, developers, and that gave us a really strong steer on what the Rother community in its wider sense wants to see coming out of a housing development strategy for Rother. From the back of that, we formed the Housing Development Strategy Task and Finish Group, which has met many times, both formally and otherwise, to very much inform the strategy that's been laid out before you. We engaged in extensive further stakeholder engagement exercises, both through formal meetings and interviews with developers, both SME and national house builders, registered providers, other and community groups, and others as well, in order to get us in the best possible position for undertaking this public consultation. Just to quickly touch on the strategy itself, there's 3 themes that we identify in the strategy. So firstly, that being a thriving local development sector. The idea with that is that Rother becomes, if it's not already, but I think we go further, to become an area where registered providers, SME developers and national house builders want to focus their business, recognising the competitive environment that we sit in as a district with other areas looking to attract quality developments into our area. The second theme is around supporting our communities. So that's where we'll look to do more community outreach as an enabling function in housing, meeting with parish councils, with community groups to better understand their desires and aspirations for new homes, what they want to see through the housing development system, and really getting out there, before the pink notice for a planning application comes around, long before that, long before hairs start running, and really understand what communities want, so they're worked with and certainly not done to in any sense. Our third theme is around taking an active role in the development of new homes. So that's looking at Rother District Council owned affordable housing. That could be acquiring Section 106 homes, for example. We know this is a really key issue in the development sector at the moment, that planning obligation homes are not often snapped up by RPs. And I spend a lot of my time trying hard to find a suitable registered provider to acquire those homes. And also having an enhanced housing enabling service to look at working directly with landowners at a very early stage to bring them into the planning process, avoiding the use of planning agents, land agents specifically, more than planning agents, more land agents, that could see land transact at higher prices, which then has a knock-on impact on the delivery of affordable homes and other community benefits that we'd like to see through new developments. I don't intend to go through the strategy in any more detail than that now, Chair. I assume members have appraised themselves of the key points. Just to confirm then that this is a report seeking your authority to go forward with a public consultation that we look forward to undertaking. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think, I will say it's an easy, readable document. Very nice. It's not sort of completely dry. Planning can be a dry sort of subject, if you like, but because you've got the graphs and the photographs and everything else, it just brings it to life a bit, doesn't it? So it's pretty simple to get through. John, you were the chairman of the group. Anything you wish to add?
Yes, I probably ought to make it clear, Chairman, that the Task and Finish group hasn't had a chance to finalise this draft. That doesn't mean that we wouldn't want it to go out to consultation, because, but we will no doubt have suggestions to make not against anything that's in the document. It's the broad thrust captures our thinking, I think, exceptionally well. But there may be points which we will want to see given a slightly different emphasis. In particular, I think we're in danger of misdefining the problem if we talk about the lack of affordable housing in Rother. I mean, the frank truth is that nothing in Rother is affordable now for people who live in Rother and work in Rother. Slightly different matter for the commuters. But the gap between our wage levels and salary levels and the house prices and the rentals is now wider than it ever has been. The notion that by taking 20% off those prices or off those rentals, you're going to bring it within the compass of most of the working population of Rother is, I think, wrong. And I think we need to be very blunt about that. That means we've got to be pretty radical in our solutions. Certainly we need a thriving development industry, and I think we need to be planning friendly towards that. And I'll come back to planning in a moment. But we probably are going to need to start a council house building programme of our own. We certainly, I think, it's an attractive proposition to behave as a developer ourselves to some extent, because what's grown up over the last 20, 30 years is a development industry that is parasitical on the building industry. I understand why it's happened, but it isn't actually that helpful in terms of prices, because it creates an artificial price for land. And then there's a top-up for the developer before he sells the site on. So we've got a break in this. We've got an oligopolistic building market. So we've got to find a way of helping our small builders to come back into the market. Here is a possible role for our housing company. So we've got to grasp the seriousness of the problem and need to be radical in our solutions. This goes, I would think, 9/10 of the way, but I think it needs a little bit of fine-tuning to go a bit further. And places, it's more a matter of clarifying than actually changing. But I look at Joe and Graham to see if they agree with my analysis of that. I have incidentally sent my own comments to Graham, and I've no doubt suitably modified. They will be included in the consultation draft. Thank you very much, Chairman.
Thank you. I think some of your points were sort of almost touched on by Graham, because you said you've got houses and you're struggling to find someone to buy them almost, a registered provider who have got, so, and then, you go from the land and, anybody knows an acre of farmland is 10,000 quid, an acre of building land is probably £1 million quid. So it's a massive, massive jump. So if you can sort of get it for 10 grand and then before you sell it, you might be getting somewhere, but yeah, and pigs might fly as well, but there it is. So, yeah, and anything you wanted to come back on there, Graham, to Councillor Barnes?
No, just to say that we do fully intend to meet with the Task and Privilege Group during this consultation process and give them the opportunity to further feed into this draft. And I very much thank Councillor Barnes for his comments, which I have looked to take on board and are being put together with other comments received. So thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, am I right in thinking there's going to be 1 or 2 more meetings of your group once the consultation's back, so you can tidy it up? Yeah, cool. Councillor Clark, and then I'll take Councillor McCall.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm pleased an 8-week consultation to give a reasonable time period for people to respond. because in the past sometimes we've condensed some of our reports like that. I agree with Councillor John Barnes. What is affordable has always to me been in inverted commas, because there was a contentious planning application in my ward last year. They built it and on the market for 650,000. Those 3 properties. Not a chance for a local young family to get on that market. And even with shared ownership schemes, you do have to provide a deposit, a certain amount of money, even for shared ownership schemes. And the other thing, this strategy at some stage, where will that run in tandem with the government's expectations and drive for their targets that they're going to be saying we should be building, So, yeah, it's very interesting to see what will come out of this consultation. But, the government are really pushing, and, how we can embrace that, it's difficult to find land, is going to be really difficult, I think.
Graham, you want to come back?
Just to come in on where we're looking to work with government and their expectations of the council and our delivery. We are working very closely with planning colleagues, and particularly planning policy colleagues, around the local plan, and the whole thrust of the strategy is that it sits alongside the local plan and is deliverable within the envelope of our local plan. That is very much the intention.
I'll take Councillor McCourt, who I invited over. Thanks for turning up. So, floor's yours.
Thank you, Chair, and redeclare an interest as a member of Bexhill Community Land Trust. I think that, first of all, commend the Task and Finish group, two councillors here, Councillors Creaser and Barnes, who've done a really good job with Graham and Joe, and of course Altair, the consultancy firm, who were guiding people through this. So I like it is very readable, I would say, which is great. It's no small feat when you're talking about housing development, often very jargon-laden area. So I like the regional approach. I think that's necessary given the increased delivery targets which will be coming our way, and also local government reform. It obviously throws up opportunities, but there are significant challenges in our way. I mean, I think really the fact that some of the figures in the report, 21 households are chasing every rental home in Rother. There have been an 18% increase in house prices 2020 to 2024 in the southeast. And as has been mentioned, we of course have a low wage economy. So the dream of getting on the property ladder, or even renting, sometimes beyond a lot of people locally. Coupled with that, we've got the challenge of the high weald, which covers 83% of Rother. We're kind of constrained by that. So it'll be interesting to see what kind of planning reforms will aid us in building homes. So there's limited land supply, but I am pleased with this, and I'm pleased with the reference especially of community-led housing being supported. And also it's great to see the housing revenue account referenced as well as an aim to strive towards, because I do think the solution is to start to build our own homes as a council going forward. And of course that will be, again, probably present a lot of opportunities if we're moving towards a unitary authority, some kind of arrangement like that. So it's pretty good. But it's not all doom and gloom, because after all we have Blackfriars, hopefully 130 affordable homes coming down the line. But I like this strategy, and I'm sure it'll be supported by the public. So well done, everyone.
Thank you. Councillor Burton.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'm pleased to hear it's in draft. There's a typo on the front page. You spotted that now. Yes. Yes, and my other comment, as putting myself in the resident shoes, on page 26, you've got key achievements and Blackfriars. I think it needs to be really emphasised that this is not about the strategy, this is what you've done. So it's achievements so far, something like that. Really not to confuse the issue about what you're consulting on, would be my suggestion. That's all. Thank you.
Is that all? Chairman of Council, Councillor Thomas.
Thank you, Chair. I repeat my thing about being Chair of the Housing Company. Firstly, I agree with Councillor Barnes about the great difficulty of finding affordable properties. Yeah. I think the nearest we can get to that is if we have a rented home with a grant to assist with the cost of that housing. The problem being, of course, that the grants are currently set
at a level lower than the rents often asked for. And that's the basic problem there. But what we're trying to do as a housing company is we're trying to put pressure upon the company we're working with, Places to People, to ensure the rents they charge are as low as they possibly can be, as a way of getting as close to that objective of yours and of everybody else's as we possibly can. I notice that when you're talking about the different actions, you're talking there about exploring opportunities for the council to fund more developments through its arm's length company. And I think that's really absolutely key. We can't afford, I think, as a council or as a company, to simply rest on our laurels and just concentrate upon the Blackfriars development. The reason for that is because, of course, there are fixed costs to running a company. The cost of the staff, etc., is quite considerable. And so to make the best use of the very expert staff we have, we do need to press ahead with further developments and for the council to become aware of that. And in particular, I think, to make a very strong distinction between investment on the one hand and expenditure on the other. Because money put into housing, it can't be said often enough, is an investment in people, an investment in community, an investment in the district, and it's also economically beneficial, as the government realises. So for all those reasons, I think money spent on the housing company should be seen essentially as investment. I'd like to really stress that point. It's also very important that you stress the idea of joint ventures, because from the council's point of view, where you are financially less than totally, as prosperous as you would like to be, to put it mildly, it's important to de-risk projects. So the council doesn't feel that it's making an unacceptable risk when it backs something. So if we go into a joint venture with a private company, that's the best guarantee I think the council can have that the venture is going to be commercially viable. So I think it's very important to stress that as well. And also the alignment with the local plan, because one of the great beauties of it coming from within a company that's associated with the council is that we should be working very, very closely, as I think Graham has said, with the local planners and seeing what land there is throughout the district that we could look at. And in particular, I think the housing company to look at fairly small-scale projects of the sort that I think Councillor Barnes would approve of within the national landscape. I think there are opportunities to a number of fairly small-scale projects there which could, from a financial point of view, be profitable. I don't think it can be emphasised sufficiently. 2 points. Firstly, that the Blackfriars scheme is intended now to be not merely financially viable, although we know it's always been a marginal site from that point of view, but we are now expecting it to yield a small profit. Only a small profit, but we have quite a margin actually within the finances of that scheme for things going wrong, which I think should mean we should come out with a profit at the end of the day. And so when the council's cash strapped, it's a good idea to look for strategies which are economically advantageous as well as socially advantageous. So I think that's really important. It's also important taking up this business about the future. Unfortunately, the council will not be here forever. And so I think it's important for the housing company to start looking, to use a phrase which has got popularity in celebrity culture, at a kind of conscious uncoupling from the council, which would enable the council and the company to exercise options from both sides, not talking about the council or the company going off and doing its own thing in some kind of, reckless way, but having discussions about how that relationship can evolve in the next few years to give the best opportunity for the company to survive the demise of the council and to continue to provide housing, maybe looking to more councils than simply the district council, looking to county councils, looking maybe to the strategic authority, etc., maybe even looking to other authorities such as Kent and Surrey. So the company, I think, needs to look in an expansionist way. It needs to look at the idea that it's offering something of social value and something of economic value, and it needs to kind of position itself in such a way as to take advantage of whatever may come out of the current proposals to local government reorganisation. So I just try to flag up a few issues here which might be of interest to members of the council. Thank you.
Not quite sure what that had to do with a draft housing development strategy, but anyway. Nothing is in isolation. Everything is interrelated.
And so the housing company is related to the entire housing development, which is related in turn to all those other issues, including local government reorganisation. And housing will be at the core of that, because the main function to be transferred, one of the main functions to be transferred from this council to a successor council is that of housing. And so if we can develop a good housing policy, that will mean the people working for this council will have the best opportunity of securing good jobs and senior jobs in whatever council may succeed. So it's a matter of looking after our employees as well as looking after the people who will need the housing we provide.
Anyway, Councillor Barnes, would you be willing to move the recommendation?
Yes, I think I would. I just would like to emphasise the challenge we're going to face with the new housing target of 935 houses a year. One of the things we said more than seriously is we will need to go out to our parish councils and town councils proactively, not merely to find sites, but to define very clearly what areas must be protected, because we shall need to have some developments in the AONB. It also, I think, means, because planning committees are going to be lent upon, undoubtedly, by the government, we do need, I think, to encourage our local parishes and town councils not only to go in for CLTs, but to make sure they have up-to-date neighbourhood plans, very clearly governing the development in their area. And that will become even more important as we move towards unitary authority. But with those remarks about the challenge that's facing us, we can't afford really to have stalled sites or sites that have been waiting around for years to come forward. And that means we may need to look at how we bring those sites up to fruition. One of the problems with Blackfriars, as we all know, was not getting the houses built. It was getting the spine road financed and dealing with the way that site then needed to be adjusted in order to make it developable. And how we handle that in the future, not just as this council, but as a unitary, I think will bear quite a considerable thought. But I'm very happy to move this for consultation at the moment, and we will come back to it when we have the results of the consultation.
Thank you. And Councillor Creasy, you're happy to second as a member of the group?
Yes, please, thank you.
Thank you. All those in favour? It's carried unanimously. Thank you very much. Draft homelessness and rough sleeping strategy, item 6, pages 45 to 90. Recommend the new draft homelessness and rough sleeping strategy 2025-2030 recommended to Cabinet for public consultation. I see I've got Caroline here. I expect you did the work on it, Caroline. So start with Caroline. Over to you, Caroline.
So it's probably the less exciting of the two housing strategies. And actually it's the first time that we split the two, and it's giving us the opportunity to focus more on the two individual areas, the development and the homeless and rough sleeping strategy. We've developed the draft of the strategy to comply with the legislation which tells us we have to have a strategy in place that lasts for 5 years, and we review the services in the area over that period to make sure that we're still providing what we need to, and identifying any gaps or improvements for provision of homeless services, where we can develop shared solutions, partnership work, and just set agreed priorities for action and the key actions and how we're going to carry them out. As I said, this strategy that we've developed has been done in conjunction with Homeless Link. Probably a lot of people will know the national membership charity for organisations working with people experiencing or at risk of homelessness. And they represent, I think, upwards of 900 organisations in England alone. So they're really in a unique position to sort of tell us more about the scale and nature of the work, both nationally and by carrying out some work and reviewing our current provision and talking with our partners. I think we had a really good opportunity with them carrying out the work for us in developing the strategy, because they were able to have, before we go to consultation, between 40 and 50 interviews with sort of key stakeholders, the kind of people that we work with every day, from the other statutory services to the voluntary organisations, and some service users as well. But I think they gave them the opportunity probably to be a bit more candid than they would have been if it had been us who were asking the questions. And then they were able to lay out the things they thought worked well and what they'd like to work with us on to improve. It also built on the work we've been doing with Shelter from a grant that we'd had to review the service. The key points really that the service review had found was that, as is obvious, I suppose the first, that the homelessness is increasing. The level of homeless applications has increased since 2017-18 from 216 to almost 600 in 23-24 and more this year, I would say. That there was obviously, as a result of a huge increase in the need for temporary accommodation. We've got over 200 households in temporary accommodation at the moment compared to 20 to 30 in 2014-15. And one of the other things that came up from the service review was what the demand was, really, and particularly the demand, high need for bedroom accommodation. And it kind of looked at the new homeless applicants we were getting, I suppose, that we were moving away from it just being sort of the young people who wanted to start out and needed somewhere to go to people right towards the end of their journey. We've had probably the highest number of people of pension age and much higher in the last couple of years. And finding solutions becomes more and more complicated with the issues they have or sometimes have. Again, the affordability of rented accommodation has been commented on over and over again. I think the last time I looked at it, they were up in the last year between September 23 and August 24, 6.2%. So it continues, and it's just making it more difficult for people to continue to stay where they are, because landlords obviously want more money, and there's got to be somewhere for the money to come from. Anyway, to continue, what we've done as part of the strategy this time is started with an action plan which sort of runs alongside the strategy to make sure that we know what we're looking to achieve right from the outset, and so we're able to sort of monitor those things almost immediately. And what we've done is we've set it out into outcomes, timeframes, and the most important objectives. There were sort of 5 key objectives or themes. The most obvious is just to increase homeless prevention, and there are a few ways we look at, we want to work towards doing that, particularly with the homeless prevention hub, so we can see people more out in the community and mix with other agencies, and more home visiting, I think. The second one was to improve accommodation pathways, so streamlining referrals into things like supported housing, having more formalised meetings with difficult people to house in the future, particularly sort of in advance of people coming up to the age of leaving care, and trying to increase the overall amount of supported accommodation rather, which would be difficult depending on what happens with the use cuts, but it's an opportunity to sort of develop a more local offer potentially, and then to further integrate our work with health and social care, and then the last 2 are about ensuring we have staff with the right skills and experience to prevent homelessness and rough sleeping, and some of that is about looking at the way that we can multi-skill people to do different roles, to do bits out in the community, to have trauma-informed training, and all those sorts of things that allow us to sort of get people to tell us their story once, and for us to be able to solve issues as soon as we can. And then the other one was just to continue to highlight the need for policy change to reduce homelessness and rough sleeping on the national and semi-local level. So through the consultation process, what we're looking to do is to prevent these objectives, look at how we work to achieve them, and ask the public and those who we're consulting to advise whether they think these should be the key priorities and why, and if there's any others that they think are important or less important. And we will likely to go to consultation. We'll probably to probably get a better result. We're looking to sort of stage ours after the housing and development consultation, so that there can be more focus on the 2. But yeah, that was it really. So it'll likely be late March, early April, I think, for 6 weeks. That's it for me.
Thank you, Karen. I think you've almost sort of mentioned what I was thinking. In that, our recommendation is to refer this on to Cabinet. And I was thinking, well, can we refer that on to Cabinet for March instead of February? Because if we got two consultations, one on housing development and one on homelessness, it sounds, I know it's nowhere near, but it sounds similar, and it might just be an overload for people and officers and everything else. So if we've got a gap between them, I think that might be a sensible idea. Does anyone else agree? Yeah. That's just as well. Councillor Barnes?
Yes, I'm very strongly in favour of separating the strategies, and separating the consultations would seem a natural corollary of that. I think we should recognise that this aspect of the strategy, the original one strategy, has been a very considerable success story. But in the face of a rising tide of homelessness, and the figures in paragraph 9 really say it all, a tenfold increase of the number of households who are in temporary accommodation over the last decade. Yeah. So it remains, I think, very challenging. It's demand-led. Again, we've managed to minimise the cost to this authority by purchasing houses. But we may very well need to actually begin to build a housing stock of our own. I've said that under the previous item. The other area which I sound like a cracked record on this, but I think I've got to repeat it because it really figures in neither strategy. A way of trying to help our under-occupation situation with a lot of the elderly people who would quite like to move but don't actually want to surrender the ownership of their house, because at the end of the day they regard this as an asset for which they save and one which they would like to pass on. And it does seem to me that if working with social services we could persuade older people to buddy up in one or other house and lease the other, we would actually begin to get a better pattern of occupation. We have a need for one-bed occupation housing, and I wouldn't dissent from that, but I think there are a lot of people who are rather reluctant to leave their house because they aren't really ready yet to surrender that asset out of the family. And it seems to me a budding up scheme and consequent leasing by what will, I hope, be one of the primary aims of the homeless and social services working closely together in the unitary, is to try to put an end to social isolation and at the same time put an end to under-occupation. Seems to me that's worth exploring as a suggestion and working it out as a practical scheme.
Thank you. Caroline, did you want to come back?
Just quickly, one of the things that came out from the initial conversations we were having with the other stakeholders was broadly similar. So it was talking about a slightly different approach, but supporting people to know how to, so people who've bought a house and lived in the house for 60 years, who now might not have the ability to do all the, easy online searching, all that sort of stuff, helping signpost or have people in roles to sort of help with that. So both people in larger social housing properties, which you also want them to give back if they can and move to something smaller, but also in owner-occupied, it came up a little bit in conversation.
Yep, Joe.
I think that the question is a good one, and it's a strategic question we've been asking ourselves for many years, well, personally, over decades in my career, and it's a challenge. But that's not to say we shouldn't have an answer. I'm not quite sure what the answer is strategically, but perhaps we can commit, and it sits across both strategies really, but I think we can commit to making inquiry after and some sort of dedicated piece of work to understand best practice, what might work, what might be effective, because it's a complex question that the motivations for people staying in the home they may have been living in for 20, 30, 40 plus years is very challenging to counter. And I think Caroline's approach, of which your solution, Councillor, could be one among many, is the right one, and about supporting people to through what is a very stressful and anxiety-filled process at the best of times moving home, but particularly if you've lived somewhere for a very long time and may be anxious about leaving. Yeah.
When I was on Greenwich Borough Council an age ago, half a century ago, one of the things that was interesting was people were ready to move out of their council house when they reached a certain age to go into either more sheltered accommodation or smaller accommodation. But in some ways, what eased that is council houses in those days passed on to the sons and daughters of the council tenant. And so, in a sense, the council tenants found it easier to move on than the owner-occupiers. And what I'm trying, in a sense, is to mirror that kind of situation for the owner-occupier. It's not the only solution. I accept we need a whole range of them. But I am very conscious of people who've gone living in a house, partly because they're used to it, but partly because they see it as now an asset in which they've put a great deal of their savings, and they want to pass that on to the next generation.
Thank you. Councillor Clark.
Thank you, Chairman. Well, I did a lot of research on this some years ago regarding social housing. Because tenants have had very long tenancies, they've got security of tenanture, and 20% of the social housing stock in Rother is single occupants. 20%. So what unfortunately happens, it's happened 3 or 4 times in the last few months in my ward. There's an elderly couple, one passes away, and after a couple of months they might be approached and say, well, we could find you a little warden care flat in central Bexhill somewhere, much better for you. You know, you've got to maintain a big house. No, this is my family home, I've been here 40 years, and, you know, I'm staying here till I die, you know. I ain't interested in moving out. But then, if they would move out, we could give that to a family, because it's a 3-bedroom house. So there's this blocking situation, which is very difficult to resolve. And also, it has changed, because I can remember years ago in my ward, where an elderly lady died, and we allowed her son to have the house on his own. So we wouldn't allow that now, because it's not really right, because we need to free that property up for a family, you know. So there's a real issue with that, and it's not so. Even with financial incentives that were offered when it was Horizon, a couple of £1,000 pay for your moving and your removal cost, people still don't want to do it. They want to stay where they are, you know. But it does mean a huge amount of social housing is single occupied.
Councillor Creaser.
I kind of agree with that. But actually, the biggest problem you've got in social housing, you know, you can't just keep passing the prices down. You've got one succession, that's it. And I've dealt with lots and lots of different tenancies in my career, and it's all the same. Now, the thing of it is that I know for a fact in Bexhill there's loads of different versions of that. The other thing is that some of the properties attract the opportunity to like to buy, and some of them don't. And we know as housing professionals when it is because of the legals that we've had to work out. Now, the biggest problem you have with getting people to downsize in social housing is, one, the offer. Who the hell wants to go and live in a prison that's called a senior facility? It's bloody awful. Now, I've never been in one that's nice. Why give up a nice house and go and live in a block of tiny places with a bunch of old people? That's the quickest way to get them killed off. Now, the thing of it is, and I have been saying this for decades, if we could offer a more reasonable opportunity, even if it's a one-bedroom flat where you've got what looks like a house, there's quite a few in Westfield, I know those, where you've got a place that looks like a house, but is in fact an upstairs and a downstairs flat, and offer it to a person downstairs who may have mobility problems, and then get them, and that's going to be nice, they'll have a bit of a garden and all the rest of it. Usually one of the upstairs has the garden in the front or the back, and the downstairs have the opposite side. And that gives that will release, that one that looks like one house, release 2 family homes. That makes more sense, because I'm telling you this, being as how I'm an age I am, if someone come and told me I'm going to have to move into an old folks home, I would be ending up in prison because I'd kill them. So, to be truthful, I think we need to give people more respect and be more thing. The other thing, of course, is that in the rural areas, if you were born and bred in a certain area, you've got your social network, you've got your friends, you've got your family, you've got the familiarity. And as a lot of people get older, they develop all kinds of health issues. So all those networks, if you're taken out of that to go into a senior facility, you're not going to necessarily be able to stay in the same village or area that you've lived. And of course, as you age, particularly in the rural areas, you are less mobile. And a lot of people can't drive anymore. I mean, quite a few of my friends have had to give up their driver's licence, not only financially, but physically, because they're not capable of driving safely anymore. So I think we need to be a bit more mindful and a bit more respectful and make that happen. That will make life a lot easier for us. I know we'd all do it if we could. And then if you think about it, put yourself in somebody else's place. If you've been living in a village, you've got your friends and family all around you, you've got a nice place, and you're taken out of that and told the only opportunity you've got is a place where you can't even have anybody come to stay because it's so pokey that you can't have a spare bed, you can't have put you up or any of that stuff in your sitting room. You're not going to get them to move. Thank you.
So if I hear a rumpus the other side of town in 5 or 6 years' time, or more, maybe 10 years' time, or even 15 years' time, I was pretty sure it might be you being asked to go into a care room.
Will the police arriving to arrest me for killing them?
This is what I'm thinking. Right. Councillor Byrne, Terry.
Thank you, Chair. Really picking up on Councillor Crease's point, which is and it's one... Yeah, I'm not going nowhere. Feet first, the only way I'll go. Anyway, it's a problem I was dealing with way back when I was a councillor in Reading, and it's exactly that. People have a local support network. Often people who are able to live almost independently on their own can only achieve that because they know their neighbours, they know the area, they have the support network. So because we're discussing a strategy, I think there should be some investigation in the same way as for supported accommodation and for taking homeless people and people with multiple needs. We try and wrap a care package round them that enables them to support as tenancy and ease them back into society. At the other end of life, perhaps we should look at what sort of package we can wrap around people when we're thinking of moving. And that the dreadful thing is, if the first time it comes up, it's we're going to move you, is dreadful. Whereas if it's broached early, there is a strategy which says, well, at some point we may have to look at this. Then that eases the blow somewhat. There's another thing we did, which is really building for the future. We built houses which could easily become maisonettes. So the plumbing, the electricity, the meters and things were put in such a way as a new build that it could become 2 units or could be 1 unit. And I think that's going to be very important in future building, that we do look at configurable housing. But again, back to strategy, we're putting this out to public consultation and there isn't a lot of detail. And I'm all for giving all the responders the maximum amount of detail, but I do think on the front of any of our strategies, we could have a consultation guide that points out where it differs from previous strategies or where there's a significant change in emphasis, really almost like an executive summary. So if you're not a parish councillor who wants to read the whole thing, if you're looking, well, how does this affect me? You can look and say, okay, I know what we're doing at the moment by personal experience, what's going to change? So a quick checklist of which bits should I look at, which will enable me to respond to the consultation. I think that would be very useful, not just for this, but for the other housing strategy. In fact, for all our strategies that we put out to consultation, a consultation guide on the front will be really useful. Thank you.
Joe's going to have a question.
Well, on this one, there is a executive summary. I don't, on the housing one, I'm not so sure, but I think corporately we can ask if that's a possibility. It's a good idea. But on this, there is an executive summary on this strategy.
Yeah, I read the executive summary, which meant a lot to me, but I wondered how, if Joe Public were looking at, I think they'd look at the size of the document and think, too much. We want to encourage people to take part in the consultation, not scare them off with massive detail.
Just a really small point. The strategy, by the point it goes out to consultation, will be a little bit less dry, I suppose. We're doing some work on it to make it a bit more less wordy. Well, not all words, but some more pictures. So it's a bit more like the housing development one, but trying to still keep the same amount of detail in it, I think.
Excellent. That sounds a good idea. Councillor Burton. No, you done? Yeah. Councillor Mrs. Barnes, you want to move it?
It isn't just the elderly who have problems, it's actually younger people as well. Because, for example, in Ticehurst at the moment, there's a plan afoot to demolish a block of residential units for elderly people and replace them with homes for people who need housing, but without bother. That is not as hugely successful as one might imagine, because you've got exactly the same thing with bringing people out of an environment with which they are thoroughly familiar and putting them down, in this case, into a country setting with a limited number of facilities. There is absolutely no leisure facilities that they have that they can't have to make themselves, and it's, in a way, it's almost upsetting the balance as well, so that you have suddenly, in the middle of a fairly settled community, a lot of people who are really not happy about where they're living and suddenly find themselves that they are there. I do think we have to do a lot more for elderly people, and that has been the big cry, particularly in the rural area. But where we are in Ticehurst, I think we've got to be careful that we actually look at the dynamic of the community as it exists and the community that we are actually going to be creating. And it's not necessarily a happy combination. So I think we really need to go at this very carefully. I do agree, that we do need to have a lot more thought about housing people, and to have 200 people who are at the moment on the in temporary accommodation on our list. I think that is very worrying. We really do need to think, but we do need to think the rural area and particularly areas like Bexhill have different needs, and I think we need to reflect that.
Councillor Cook.
Thank you. Yes, I just want to compliment you on including the Renters' Rights Bill. I'm very aware that a lot of people are made homeless because landlords are reclaiming their houses back to sell, and people cannot afford the increase in rents and therefore are becoming homeless. So I'm very pleased about this. I'm perfectly happy to move that we recommend to Cabinet that this strategy goes forward. Perhaps, as with the housing strategy, with a few sort of diagrammatic explanations of some of the statistics, makes it a lot more readable and a lot more understandable. But with those, and with a slight delay, we were going to recommend, weren't we, a slight delay in the dates for the strategy. But I would like to recommend that we put this forward to Cabinet.
Thank you. Councillor Creaser, happy to second?
Yes, of course. I'd also like to commend Caroline for, Officer Wakefield, on her amazing work. She's making such a difference, and I think sometimes, Joe will know this from his own experience, that it's a blooming thankless task. And I know I was a bit flippant earlier about killing people. I didn't really mean it much. But, you know, I really do take my hat off, because I come across lots of people doing the similar roles to Caroline. But I have to say, she's probably an exemplar individual in that particular field. So thank you.
Well done. All those in favour? That's carried unanimously. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Caroline. What have we got now? Item 7, key performance targets 25, 26, pages 91 to 98. Yep. Anna's here somewhere. She's on the screen, so I'm told. So what have we got to do? We've got consider the proposals for measuring the council's corporate performances for 25, 26. This is not actual key KPIs up and downs. This is the which ones you want to look at. Okie dokie.
Right, are you ready for me?
Oh, yep. Oh, there you are. Yep, hi Anna.
Hi, good evening everyone. As Councillor Osborne says, this isn't the performance up until the third quarter. That will be presented at the next committee meeting. This is to review the existing KPIs, and this year we're recommending changing 2 of them. The first one is the estates KPI, an amendment to expected income plus 2%, and the other suite of changes are around the planning development KPIs. They've all been recommended to be aligned with the changes to the new national planning development arrangements. So you will see that they've all been changed slightly. I have just been notified of a change to P4 under planning development management. So P4 currently reads on the left-hand side, minor development planning appeals. That minor should actually read non-major. So it's to replace the word minor with non-major. So in a nutshell, there are just those changes, one to the estates, the changes to the planning development management. The only other thing that I really wanted to bring to members' attention is that the Office of Local Government, OFLOG, has been closed, and in the normal routine performance reports, we would benchmark against other local authorities. We probably won't be doing this in the near future until we find out what monitoring arrangements are going to be in place nationally. I'm happy to take any questions.
Okay, thank you very much, Anna. Any questions? Councillor Burton. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to just have a little talk about the climate strategy, AM1, on the document. And I was disappointed to see that there was only one KPI related to climate, and it's actually quite narrow because it only relates to emissions in Rother District Council buildings. So that is actually, for me, relatively narrow and there isn't at the moment any other KPIs, and I would think that ecology, green spaces, I would like to consider that we maybe could add to that because it's such an important area. I could have some ideas myself about monitoring waste management and that we're actually decreasing the amount of stuff we put in our black bin. I'm sure how much wildflower meadows we have. But you also mentioned that you go to, I can't remember the initials, for guidance of what other authorities do, which sounds also a good idea, that they may have some way better ideas than me to what other authorities do to widen the scope at looking at our climate and climate change. Of course, there's the Climate Change Steering Group, which is another opportunity to look at what we are doing, and that may be an idea. That was my comment, really. So it's very strange to look up there and everybody's here. I don't know for the camera where I'm meant to look. Excuse me. Anyway, that was my comment, Chair.
Thank you. Any thoughts on that, Anna? I suppose ultimately we can only record what we can ultimately have responsibility for, isn't it?
Yeah, this is a really difficult one, and I know this is one that we had last year, and I know that when this one was first accepted, it was really quite difficult to know what to put in there. And the one thing that we do know we can measure, as you quite rightly said, is our own organisational emissions. We have got a climate strategy, and that is a whole suite of things, isn't it, about how we can, reduce emissions and, but it's very, very tricky to try and pick a set of measures for this particular KPI that we can properly measure.
Yeah. Can I suggest the Climate Change Steering Group meets next Thursday? I won't be there. But you're on it, aren't you? Yeah, well, is it worth mentioning there and see what can come out?
Can I speak, Chair? I think Anna hopefully will be at that meeting as well. So anything that you can pick up that other authorities do would be really valid. And maybe it's not possible, but I think it would highlight the importance of this area of work to do a bit more if we could.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Burton. I'll do some more research and I will be there next week and we can discuss that further.
Thank you.
Okie dokie. Councillor Barnes, you want to move it?
Yes. First of all, really disappointed that they've got rid of the relevant government department. I don't know what the thinking is, but that seems to me a backward step, because local government normally has proceeded to improve by looking at what others do and asking what they do better. And if you remove that comparison, it's very disappointing. I don't know what the LGA is doing about that, but I would hope that the LGA is being asked to keep pressure up on the government to find a viable way of monitoring all our performance. I wanted just to comment on housing. We have 3 targets here. 2 of them seem to be perfectly acceptable, though H2, I do wonder about the wisdom of freezing the sum, because we know that housing costs in general are rising. I just wonder if we're not being a little arbitrary in freezing that. The one that really worried me, I supported monitoring last year because it seemed to me very difficult to establish a figure. But now we've got a year's experience of monitoring, we must be able to make an informed guess and set ourselves some kind of performance target there. It may be one that will be more difficult to hit because it is a demand-led service. But if we don't set ourselves a target, it seems to me we're being a bit complacent. So I would like to see us at least have a shot at putting a target in there.
Which one is that? Is that H3? Yeah.
That is H3. Average weeks a household was in temporary.
Thanks, Councillor. On H2, the thinking there is that the measure is meant to be tracking the impact of our own RDC council-owned accommodation.
Yeah.
So that the cost is coming down on average. So we're hoping to keep ourselves sort of on a tight KPI there on that one. On H3, I agree 100%. There should be something there, and there isn't, and I'll make sure that's corrected before it's submitted to Cabinet if that satisfies you. Yeah.
Happy with that? Cool. Happy to move it, as stated. Moved by Councillor Barnes, seconded by Councillor Burton. All those in favour? It's carried unanimously. Thank you very much, Anna. Item 8, draft budget. What have we got here? Receive a draft revenue budget for 25-26 and a proposed capital programme to submit these to Cabinet for any recommendations or amendments. Officer recommendation be resolved that the comments of this committee be considered by Cabinet when recommending the final budget to full council at its meeting. Now that didn't read very nicely. I mentioned that the other day. Scrutiny committee be considered by Cabinet when recommending the final budget to full council. Cabinet meeting is on the 3rd of February, just for clarity, not council. Andrew.
Thank you. So we took a draft budget to this committee, I think, in November. So there's several updates since then in this report. The settlement came out just before Christmas, and as expected, it was very poor for ourselves and most other districts, in fact. And as predicted, government has shifted money already to social care authorities to a certain extent, and I know the county didn't get as much as it would have wished, but also to authorities up north, where I think the government perceives it's redressing some of the work of the previous government, where the sort of northern Mets did complain about money being shifted allegedly to the southeast. So that is as expected. So authorities like Blackpool have had 9.5% increases in their funding, and we've had a 3% cash terms cut. Our core spending power remains the same, but we're expected to make up that 3% of our council tax increase. That is a 5 to 6% cut in real terms after inflation, and it's best part of £1 million cut in funding, in effect. Unfortunately, I would have hoped that if government was going to cut its direct funding to us, it might give us a bit more leeway on council tax to make up the difference. But this government is maintaining the council tax capping regime of the previous government. So we are still capped at 2.99%, and the government has ignored the DCN's request to raise the £5 alternative limit up to £10. So 2.99% is bigger than £5 for us, so that is our cap, effectively, this year. The end result is that we are potentially using more than 1.4 million of general fund reserves in this budget. I hope to bring that figure down a little bit in the final final budget that Cabinet recommends to Council. We're doing some work below the line with things like collection fund accounts at the minute, where hopefully we might be able to bring that use of reserves down slightly, but it is still going to be around £1 million use of reserves at this stage. The other thing we are going to do as a result of obviously everyone's concerns about such use of reserves, we are going to bring in internally a spending control panel that will review all expenditure potentially over £500, where Chief Exec and myself will review all purchase orders over £500 to question whether that expenditure is necessary, even if it is within budget. So that will be a bit of a culture change in order to try and get spending in year below the budget, so there's less pressure on reserves. So we are going to take some actions during the year, very soon, in fact, even maybe before the year starts, to look at areas like that. Major change from the paper that came in November, obviously, is we've now had the consultation process. That the interim report is at Appendix F. I think that takes the report on consultation up to about 2 days before the consultation actually closed, so it will be a very accurate reflection of the final report that will go to Cabinet. It was a record-breaking consultation, as the report says. I think we've had over 1,300 responses, and you won't be surprised to hear that most of the opposition was towards charging in the car parks that currently don't charge, particularly Norvium, where we had over 800 responses. I think there may have been a campaign there. Police have opposed the cut to the Travellers site, and I had a meeting with them today. They are not happy that we are cutting the funding for that. So that the fees and charges are in the report that weren't here in November in detail. The consultation is there. We're working still on capital. We're making some slight adjustments to capital that will be in the capital in the final cabinet report. But this is the budget more or less as it will be in its final stage.
Thank you very much, Andrew. Right, I'm going to kick off here. Not in a bad way. Not like I'm at work or something, getting a bad temper on. No, I'm thinking the car parks. We thought that might cause an element of disagreement across the district. Item 15, bullet point 15, page 129. Over 1,200 comments received over the Christmas period, which have not yet been analysed. 193 respondents, 150 respondents, 127, 72, 69. So I'm thinking sort of, we've got Sidley Car Park. I've had emails from Sidley Car Park from the ward member, from Councillor Bayliss as well. There's a petition, I understand, with some 900 signatures on it, which is supposedly coming. You know, can we sort of, can this committee recommend, or should this committee recommend to Cabinet that they look again at these or take them out? So we've got the Sidley Car Park, the Gorses Car Park, you know, looking to bring in £2,000 a year. Is it worth the bad publicity, if you like, and the sheer aggravation for the sake of £2,000? Norvium, we've had Andrew mention many complaints. I've had an email from the chair of the patient participation group who needs my response by Thursday because they got a meeting. You know, that's sort of looking at best idea of £8,000. Settlescombe, again, should we take that out? Bexhill Leisure Centre, I'm not so sure, I don't know. Broad Oak, same as Norvium. Little Common Recreation, you know, to me, you know, if you're going to go to Little Common Rec to play football, you know, you just want to rock up and play football, don't you? You know, I know, speaking to the chief executive, some of the car parks are sort of starting to be, you know, it's like a residence parking permit, you know, almost sort of type of thing where people rock up to do their thing and they can't get in the car park because they're full up with people who live nearby, and that's sort of taking the mickey a bit. Hurst Green, again, you know, is it worth their while sending a chap out there every other day to see if people are buying tickets for these car parks? I don't know. You know, is it a recommendation we can make? I've got three people online, 3 hands up. I'll take the room first. I'll take Councillor Creaser first this time, as opposed to
Chairman, I think I ought to come in first as I've got an interest.
All right, you want to declare? Yeah, go on in, Carl. Declare your interest.
Do you want me to carry on? Because it might be a good idea.
Go on then.
Thank you very much indeed, Chairman. And can I just first start by obviously declaring once again personal interest in executive member for East Sussex County Council. But can I start by thanking the officers for the work that's been done to get the budget to this stage. Never easy, and it seems to get more and more difficult. Whoever's in central government, it does seem that local government certainly down this end of the country, at times we have some very challenging figures to juggle, and obviously we have statutory services we provide, we have discretionary services that we provide. But the members of the public out there expect us to obviously maintain all of those services, and obviously the mood music for many years now is to rationalise what we as local government do. And obviously I think that there is a genuine thanks also to the parish councils sometimes for taking up things that we've previously done under the auspices of devolution. I do think, however, that we haven't done enough in terms of that devolution agenda, really engaging with community groups and parish councils. The Devo agenda in terms of public conveniences in terms of other things that we've engaged with parishes with, hasn't been good in terms of the required amount of capital being transferred over to parish councils. And if this, what was proposed in terms of the car parking charges, and may I add the advertising for rent of some of those former sites, which I think is also a flawed policy. If that was an attempt to re-engage with those parish councils, well, then that frankly isn't the right way to do it. I hope that we can get to the table with the parish councils affected where they haven't already taken on those public conveniences in the not too distant future, and just get on with that, frankly. Chairman, in terms of the total budget, what you're talking about in terms of car parking charges is but a small part. But obviously there's been an awful lot of public disquiet across the whole of the district with regard to this matter. If we're not careful tonight, we're going to end up debating that small part for a very long time. I know I can't vote on it, but I'm quite happy to move that we remove all of the additional car parking charges proposed. I'm quite happy to move that, or if somebody in the room wants to move it, I'm quite happy to move it. But the reality is, our post boxes or email inboxes, telephone calls from concerned residents and users has been huge. I mean, if I just use the example, and I'll try and keep it as brief as I can, if I just use the example of Settlescombe, it's not just the fact that you'd be asking people to pay for parking. It's the road safety issues that then come about when you've got busy times such as school runs, when people are coming in most of them coming in from outside of Settlescombe to drop their children off. It's people just stopping to pick up their prescriptions that won't frankly pay to park, that will use the residential roads in Settlescombe, that will park where they shouldn't. And the real enforcement, frankly, in terms of pedestrian safety and road safety should be on the public highway, not upon our car parks as a revenue raiser. It's an absolute folly to introduce this. And I think, if I may, Chairman, in terms of the leisure centre, I think at a time when we're encouraging people, and I've already declared that interest as executive member for adult social care and health, but as a time when we're encouraging people to keep fit and we want people to use our facilities, right now, and again in the future it may be appropriate, but right now when we're under the problems that we know that people have in terms of their finances, especially where the Bexhill Leisure Centre is situated, the last thing we should be doing is dissuading anybody in any way, shape or form from using those facilities. And I think that the message it's sending out to the public is the wrong one. The public should be interested in the big ticket items that are in our budget. We are talking about a very small part of the budget, but I can understand why there's a lot of public disquiet over this. Just before I leave, a slightly flippant point, but when we're talking about making savings, the Settlescombe public conveniences have been closed for some time now, and the light's still on and is on 24/7, Chairman. So if somebody could get out and just pull the plug, I think that would be very prudent. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much. I'll go back to Councillor Creaser.
In terms of car parks and such, in the rural areas particularly, I couldn't agree more. It's a folly. I mean, the one in Northiam is actually in the doctor's practice car park. It's attached to the doctor's practice. And parents do stop there. I mean, I know the area. Parents do stop there. And various other places that are similar. I'm not entirely sure about the leisure centres, because the Rye Leisure Centre, and I hope it continues to do so, has had a scheme where you get a ticket, and then if you're going in to use a facility, you can get that refunded against your entrance. Otherwise, what will happen is that if it's all free to everybody, all the tourists will just start using it, and then it wouldn't be available for what it's for. And I think that is a good way of not actually charging, but putting others off. So that if they're not going in the swimming pool or the leisure centre, they're not going to get a refund of what they put out. So that's not a problem as far as I'm concerned. I would say places like Delaware, because it is a commercial venture, because it's a tourist destination, I think places like that, we should leave that alone and let it continue. But in terms of where it's residents and local people, I think, a good compromise. Plus the fact is, if you get the parishes to take those on, I know that you don't want to give things away, but you're not actually giving anything away, giving it back. But having said that, if the parish councils are prepared to make sure that they do the right thing with these things, I can't see why we can't hand it over. It's not going to cost us any money going forward. We might lose the original capital amount, but having said that, we will keep a facility and our reputational damage limited down to some degree, and I think we'd be far better off to have that conversation. As far as the toilets are concerned, obviously, as I'm from Rye, and I'm also part of the team that serves Icklesham Parish Council, if we could do that, because the uproar that happened once it was advertised for all this, paying for this, that and the next thing, you know, it's okay if they were in pristine order, but there are none of them that are pristine order. And they've been neglected, and tree roots and all the rest of the malarkey. And if you could make it a reasonable thing and hand that over to the parish councils, because we won't exist in a few years' time anyway here, and it would give them the opportunity in terms of devolution to actually take responsibility for what's within their area. Thank you.
Yeah, I wouldn't disagree with that. I think you could argue that time is, you know, the clock is ticking, and if we've been talking about devolving services to parishes for donkey's years, and now there could be a finite time where they either want to do it or they don't. If they want to do it, best crack on. I don't want to make it
I'd like to make
meeting.
that a proposal, please.
Yep.
Less words in it.
I don't want to sort of make it a meeting about car parks, because we're supposed to be discussing the budget. Yeah. Who wants to talk about car parks? Go on then, Mark. You
Only just really quickly. Thank you very much, Chair. Just to say that I think I'm very, very supportive in this sort of proposal of knocking that out. I've spoken to residents and businesses in Sidley, and they really, really believe that that would be the final nail in the coffin of trade up at that end of the district. So.
Yeah, I think ultimately we're only recommending to Cabinet via Cabinet decision to then pass on to Council. So we can do our part, and if Cabinet listen to us, then they can do. Well, we've got Councillor Cooper. I heard a plea there on car parks, I think.
Yes, please. Can I just re-declare that I'm a Westfield and Sedlescombe Parish Councillor? I don't know if I have to declare it, but I'm a user of Sedlescombe Car Park on pretty much a daily basis, twice a day. So I have pretty good first-hand experience. And the current situation is it's already a safety issue once the car park is full. And I know Councillor Timpey can confirm she's assisted us in getting enforcement out already. Now, what will happen, I know, parents will not come in and pay to park in that car park. They will just park dangerously, and it will be a major, major safety issue. The main users of that car park are school staff and the doctor's staff. And, you know, you're going to be penalising people that are coming into work for, you know, a couple of hours at school to help at dinner time, dinner ladies. And another important group, which is invaluable to the school, is volunteers. The school would not survive without the volunteers, and this would really put off volunteers if they had to pay to park to come and volunteer at the school. I don't think you would get very much income. I don't think you would get even 8,000. I think that's not realistic at all. Thank you.
Thank you. Right, we've got that out of our system. Councillor Cook.
Thank you. Yes, I'd like to second the proposal that we remove all car parking charges from this budget and have a proper discussion at another time. Having sat on the car park task and finish group, I realise how volatile and how passionate people are about paying to park their cars. And as Vice Chair of Battletown Council, I'm very concerned about the introduction of charges for the coach park when we're really struggling with our tourists. So I'd like to suggest that, or second the proposal, that we remove all of those from this and either have a task and finish group? Or
Delaware car parking.
I'm quite happy
Oh, I
to
beg
drop
your
that if you
pardon.
want. But obviously where it's car parks that are serving local communities rather than tourist destination is most important.
Yeah, I think what I'll do, I'll go for some clarity. So let's get it. Sydney car park, I'm talking about. The Gorses car park.
Chairman, it's all the additional ones that are not currently charging.
5 to 30.
That's the clarity.
Yeah, we've got changes to the Delaware car park, the opening hours, is that correct?
The evening charging.
Yeah, evening charging to the Delaware, so we want to
And there's
include that.
coach parking at 2 car parks as well,
And
which
coach.
again is not affecting tourists, charging tourists.
Yeah.
It seems to me that you're dealing with car parks which have a multiplicity of users who have to use that, and you don't want to force them out onto the highways. I have one in my village which fortunately is escape charging, and just as well because it is in fact the only parking available to certain residents. So I would be in favour of not charging. What I do suspect, because we're not going to be in existence for very long, I think we've got to make sure these car parks are taken on locally by the local council. Therefore, what I'd rather see, rather than saying simply we boot the can down the road, I think we should suspend the charges as long as the local council enters into serious discussions on devolution. That actually achieves two purposes. It gets the parish councils thinking hard about the future. It means that the residents don't face charges, but there is this bit of stick in the background because I can't see a unitary authority being quite as caring as we are.
I think that's probably a good idea, and it was similar to what I was thinking, but just put better, if I may say so. So, yeah, well, there won't be any trouble at home tonight, John, because she's seconded it. So that's right. So that small amendment, I think that's probably a sensible idea. Yeah, we can go.
Chairman, I moved it, and I'm not happy with the word postponed. I think we've sent a clear message to parish councils as things stand. I think we need to, negotiate properly where these facilities need. It's not just car parking; it's public conveniences. We just need to get back round the table with the parishes, and I think the word postpone will still worry residents and users of those car parks. So I think we do need to kick it out. However, the comments that have been made about coach parking and the Delaware Pavilion, I think it's fine for those to be in, to be quite frank, where it's a tourist destination. But I just think, in terms of Sidley, in terms of some of those rural car parks, we don't want to be saying postpone, because it would be a complete folly to introduce any sort of charges in those car parks. Thank you, Chairman.
I'm told you can't move because you're not here. The boss lady said so.
I think I can, but I can't vote.
No, I don't think you can move. No. Anyway, shan't have that argument. Right, where are we going? Councillor Byrne.
Just a quick comment, really, following on from what Councillor Maynard said. It has been known in the past that even when when a parish wants to take on something, or rather wants to devolve it, the cold dead hand of legal and admin has got in the way. Now, I think it's going to be very important in the next few months that any time a town council, and again, I'll redeclare that I'm a member of Bexhill Town Council, I would like to think that if we vote to take a car park or a public convenience, it's a short time scale, a very tightly defined process, and that will happen quickly, which will then give Andrew some indication of the loss of revenue in terms of car park for how long You know, is it going to take? So it can't be open-ended, and we must look at that procedure again and make sure it's as tight as it possibly can be, please.
Councillor Creaser.
I obviously kicked off by saying that I wanted to make a proposal, and actually I will propose what Carl Maynard has said. And if I can withdraw my first one and then go with that one, that makes more sense, and it also includes what John has said. So we need to just do it, and also as I say, the car parks, the toilets and whatever else, and just get on with it.
Well, we're recommending to Cabinet.
Yeah.
Ultimately, so Cabinet will make the decision. So we recommend to Cabinet that, so what are we recommending to Cabinet? We recommend to Cabinet we take out these specific car parks.
I think so long as it's negotiation.
Or we're recommending that they go to a negotiated.
I think they've all got individual cases, but really they've got to back it up by taking over. Otherwise, I can see we're not going to be in an easier financial situation in 2028 than we are now, and I can see Unitary not being at all as generous as we are. I therefore think we do need effectively to provide both an inducement and a bit of a stick to make damn sure the parish councils and the town councils get into serious negotiations so that devolution does this time take place.
Just for information, Lorna and myself are going to Rauch on Wednesday to start talking to the parishes about the implications of reorganisation, and your point about the continuing authority, whatever it is, being in a dire financial position in 3 or 4 years' time, which I think it will be, and that the parishes need to start thinking about taking over some of our services, either on devolution day, on what we call vesting day, whatever it's called, but maybe before that as well. So we are going to ask them to start thinking seriously about the consequences of reorganisation this week.
Councillor Burton.
Yes, I'd like to amend that we consider the Delaware Pavilion car park facility separately to the coach car parks, because the coach park provides visitors to the towns, that provides income to shops and facilities, and we need to encourage that. So there may be a different view about that one, whereas the Delaware is a different feature. People are coming to the theatre, included in their price, buying a ticket is actually parking their car. And so I think they're different scenarios. So I would like to separate our recommendation when they consider them at Cabinet. Is that okay?
I'm getting ever so slightly confused now. So I think everybody's getting, Joe's joined me in the confusion.
I think the
now.
Delaware is a slightly separate issue. I can't see the town council wanting to take on the Delaware Pavilion. And to my mind, that one is not akin to any other car park in any other part of Rolla.
Well, let's leave it. If you want to lobby a cabinet member, then you can lobby a cabinet member, see if they can include it in their recommendation. I think from our point of view, I just want to sort of get these few here. Now, so which route are we going down? I've got Councillor Maynard wants to just sort of pull them out and forget about it, and you, John, and I think Cheryl want to put a time limit on it. Say we're going to step back for 18 months or 2 years, in which time we may not even be here.
It's not so much a time limit, because I'm with Councillor Byrne, that really we need to have a serious process of devolution. What I'm concerned is to make sure that we don't just kick it down the road, because I really am concerned what the position of the Unitary Authority will be on vesting day. We already know they're going to have a huge adult social care debt, and the government has postponed sorting out social care at least 18 months, more likely 2.5 years. So on vesting day, East Sussex is going to be in bad financial trouble. I really don't want to leave them the chance to impose charges on those socially important car parks. But I do think we therefore need to have a serious negotiation. And I've always thought with a negotiation, having a fallback position, which is actually a bit of a stake, is sensible, because it actually makes people think really hard about what they're doing.
Joe, you wanted to come in?
I was only just to reiterate what Andrew said, that there is a separate process going on about the devolution of assets to parishes, and I think we should leave that process there and perhaps not try to... I do understand the motivation, but I wonder whether it would be, if it reassures members that is a serious process that's being embarked upon there with the parishes, and it's in everyone's shared interest to see assets sustained for the benefit of the community, not least the parishes want to see that outcome as well. So we haven't heard from any parish reluctant to take on assets, I think I'm right in saying. And they're all very keen to take a role, and if that changes, that will come forward to you in future reports. But for the purposes of this report, we're hearing, and I'm hearing, that we want to remove those car parks that are community used, with the exception of the Delaware and the coach parks, subject to conversations and decisions at Cabinet. Again, to remind members, this is recommendations to Cabinet, not decisions here, is it? So if that satisfies members, I think perhaps that's a succinct amendment. Yeah.
Councillor Crease.
Chairman, if I may.
All right, wait, Councillor Crease.
Just to say, I totally agree with what Joe's just said, because I think that we're just getting trying to have crystal ball gazing here, and we don't even know yet whether there will be a unitary authority. I think we just have to set this in a bit of context. The two are separate things, separate matters. This proposal for charging has raised a huge amount of local uproar across the whole of the district. We've recognised that. The issue of the devolution, and let's be absolutely clear, we got hung up on the issue of leaseholds and freeholds. Officers are aware of that. That's been through Cabinet as well last year. And I understand, and again, this is anecdotal evidence, that where there have been capital investment required, that we haven't quite offered enough. So it takes two to tango, but those negotiations, I'm satisfied from what Joe has just said, that those negotiations will now kick up a step. It should have happened in the past. We are where we are, but Joe's given a very clear assurance to all of us around the table tonight that those negotiations will take place. Those conversations will be had at RALC with those individual parish councils so that we can get this devolution agenda where it should be. And I'm quite happy with that, and quite happy as he suggested.
Thank you. Councillor Crease.
I'd like to reiterate the fact that we have, as obviously again as a parish councillor and a district councillor, I joined quite a lot of our other colleagues from other colleagues from this council and also from the parishes, and we've been working on this quite a lot ever since I've been on the council. I'm sure long before that, and I think that we need to get on with it, because whichever way you cut the cake, it needs to be sorted out. And I definitely think we should just, move forward with that, get on with the devolution. If there are parishes that don't want to do it, they weren't on any of the meetings that I went to, and all of the parishes were very keen. But again, they have a limited amount of money, again, like all the rest of the various levels of governance. They have a limited amount to spend, so we need to make it very clear that we mean business, because up until quite recently, they were just being messed about, and that's the truth of it. So we need to get everyone round the table. You'll have no problem getting the parish councils around the table, because they want to get on with it. They want to move forward, they want to get the toilets sorted out. Some of them have already done quite a bit. Icklesham's done stuff, Rye's done stuff, and I'm sure others have as well, but they're the two councils I'm involved with. And just move forward and get it organised. And I think at the end of the day, really pleased that Andrew and Lorna are going to visit with Rauch. So I think we need to reassure the parish councils that we mean business and we want to do it, not just keep changing the goalposts, because that's what it seemed to be happening until quite recently. So thank you. Thank you, Andrew.
Okay, thank you. Right, we've got a motion on the table from John, which wants to give us, if you accept Joe's wording. So I should move from the chair, if I'm allowed to do that, I think I am, that the car parks that we've been talking about are taken out, and we recommend to Cabinet that we don't charge for them.
The car parks we've just been talking about are which? Can we enumerate those?
Been trying. Sidley, the Gorses, Norvium, Serlescombe, Bexhill Leisure Centre, Broad Oak Park, Little Common Rec, Hurst Green. Yep. Right. Now then, we've got a budget to talk about. If anybody didn't notice. Andrew, anything you want to add, or any members want to say anything? Yeah. Resolve the comments of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee be considered by Cabinet when recommending the final budget to full council at its meeting. Shall we just leave it to Cabinet and say, well, we've taken the car parks out, you can do all the rest of it? John.
I can't recommend this budget. I'm sorry, I'm wrestling with the problem. We have delivered £3 in every 4 of the savings we identified this year. We are therefore going to go below the 5 million, but we're not only going by the fact we've failed to save that money, but we've actually had unexpected pressures, which frankly are going to take us much closer to 900,000. And so you end really with a much lower percentage than the one we've always thought sensible, which is about 32% of the budget. That in itself is not a problem, but we're now talking about actually a further reliance on reserves in the coming year because we can't make up our mind to make the necessary savings. And so we then get down not just to below 5 million, we get down to below 4 million. And we're beginning on a trajectory, if you turn to the appendix, where we end up on roughly 2 months, if you're lucky. And we're going to bequeath that, if we do go out of existence, to a unitary authority which we know is already in serious financial trouble. I think that is irresponsible. Second point is I don't think we're building enough in at this stage for either inflation. We're doing it at under 2%. My guess is that you ought to be building in on non-pay inflation at least 2.5%. My guess is that on pay, we shall also end up, particularly if we rejoin the NJC, I think we shall end up paying more on that than we've budgeted for. In other words, I think we shall end up not only below 4 million, but we might end up beginning to get rather close to the 3 million mark. I really cannot think that is a sensible stance to take in the current situation. I blame the government. I have to say, the notion of taking away the rural delivery grant, when we all know that rural services cost more money to deliver, was a terrible error on the part of this government. But they don't understand the rural economy or rural services. And so that's a bad error. The fact that they aren't acknowledging that local government is in a serious financial situation is, I think, appalling, because a lot of key services are going to be under threat. And they'll be under threat because the unitary authority will have 3 demand-led services. Adult social care, which is not going to be reformed, children, and particularly special needs children, and there are going to be extra pressures there because of certain other actions the government has taken. They focus on Eton and Winchester. I look at the special schools, like the little one in my patch in Mansfield, who are now facing additional costs for the parents who use it. And then you've got homelessness. Now, we've handled that better, but you can't say that Hastings, not yet with the town council, Eastbourne, not yet with the town council, a third of both their budgets actually going on homelessness at the moment. So they're nearly bankrupt. I think for us to be irresponsible and not make a sensible, serious budget is really against the interests, medium term, of the people we represent.
So your suggestion would be, ultimately,
do budget for a proper balanced budget, and we impose some financial discipline on ourselves. We can kick the can down the road. In the end, it's our residents who'll pay, not the councillors. We won't be here to actually take accountability for what we've done.
well, all I'm thinking is we have got to recommend something to Cabinet for them to set the final budget.
And we make proper provision for inflation. I'm sorry for Andrew, who will have the nasty task of trying to deliver it. But if we are not responsible, I think we really are doing a disservice to the medium-term interests of our residents.
I'm just wondering on how I put that to Cabinet. Lisa's wishing that Louise was here now in writing up that. So, yeah. I'm going to
I think as a committee you've got to recommend what cuts you'd want to make to £1 million of cuts you want to suggest to me this evening.
This is what I'm thinking. I know it's all right for us to say, well, we don't agree with the budget, and send it to Cabinet, and Cabinet are going to say, well, thanks a lot. What do you suggest? And I say, well, don't try and make 40,000 quid out of some car parks, which is going the wrong way. So,
Councillor Osborne, you've got Councillor McGurk has wanted to speak for some time.
yeah, I don't need to be told by some Cabinet member. I can see them. He's gone dark. Simon.
Thanks, Paul. Thanks, Chairman. In terms of wording, I know I might not be able to move because I'm attending remotely, but I wanted to suggest that we simply, stick to the issue which has been fed back robustly in consultation from local residents, businesses and stakeholders, specifically about car parking charges, and ask that we recommend to Cabinet the proposed charges be reconsidered or ideally removed from the budget. Additionally, how can the Council ensure that any future car park strategy takes into account the broader economic and social needs of the community, rather than focusing solely on minimal potential income generation and a relatively unenforceable one at that? So that was the sort of wording that I was hoping we could recommend to Cabinet, and then Cabinet can reconsider, and we're making a simple recommendation then.
I think that's pretty much probably what we've already recommended. Councillor Byrne.
Thank you, Chair. I'm afraid I'll have to cross swords with with Councillor Barnes. I think we're in danger of trying to tailor our budget decisions to second guess how the unitary authorities will or will not be financed, and what will be done by the amount of debt or surplus that the new unitary inherit. And I don't think, well, I'd be very happy to hear the opinions of my colleagues around the table. I don't think we, the whole of the committee, take the same view as Councillor Barnes. So I think it would be reasonable to take a vote on what we do put forward to Cabinet, whilst still acknowledging that Councillor Barnes will obviously lobby quite hard to the Cabinet and put forward more specific suggestions, as Andrew has said, as to the areas we could sort of slash and burn. But at the moment, I get the impression in the room that we will be happy to put this budget, to approve this budget to Cabinet with the caveat on the car parks, and let Cabinet and future Council debate sort out what's coming down the track in terms of possible unitary finance.
Yep, and as Andrew said, we're ultimately 3% down on last year before we start. So, yeah. I've put a motion. If it's seconded. All right, so John's motion is that we don't accept the budget, basically.
No, my recommendation is... My recommendation is that we seek to get to a balanced budget and we make proper provision for inflation, because on both pay and non-pay, I think, frankly, the figures are too low at the moment. I realise that's an unpleasant and unpopular position, but I really cannot live with my conscience if I go forward, because I really do not believe in unreal optimism about the future. I think we are facing a public expenditure problem in this country because we haven't grown for 10 years. And we've got to be realistic. Otherwise, I think in the end, we shall be getting rid of whole acres of service, which will be at district level, even though they'll be imposed by the unitary. Yeah. Yeah, I'm still just wondering how I present this to Cabinet in a couple of weeks' time, a fortnight's time. Yeah. Yeah. Councillor Thomas.
Can I just ask a question about this? Because when Councillor Barnes says he would like to see more of the balanced budget, does he mean by that that he would like to see expenditure pruned dramatically on top of the changes we've already made? Is that what you're suggesting? I'm not sure that I would be happy to support a decision here and now by us that we recommend to Cabinet that what we want is more cuts on top of what we've already got. I wouldn't be happy with that.
I want a serious budget. If in the end we have to borrow something, we have to borrow something, because we may well be blown off course again. But to actually budget at the outset for year after year in succession for not balancing the budget has left us in a situation where, frankly, if unitary doesn't come off and the district goes on, we ourselves, I do look at the appendix very seriously, look at the trajectory, we come to a situation where we will be declaring bankruptcy. If the unitary goes forward, I think the unitary will be facing bankruptcy. It's an unpleasant decision, but if we don't grip it now, we shall be faced with gripping it in 2 years' time.
Andrew.
I think the government is strangling districts deliberately to force districts into accepting reorganisation. That's the national context. There are 20 authorities already in what they call exceptional financial support, which is a step before 114. There's likely to be at least 20 more from this budget. At least 2 of our neighbours are likely to hand over no reserves at all to a new authority in Eastbourne and Hastings at the very least. What we as officers are trying to do is preserve services as much as we can by a variety of means, such as devolution, as we've just talked about. So we are going to go out to the parishes and say, we can't afford to run all these services anymore, even prior to NUT 28 or something like that. So what we are doing here is, yes, if we have 3 or 4 years to go, we could well run out of money and have to ask for exceptional financial support. I wouldn't want to go to a 114. There are stages before that, such as exceptional financial support. It's not very exceptional anymore, so maybe we just rename financial support by then, because there'll be hundreds of authorities asking for it, all in the same boat. What I mentioned earlier about things like spending control panels that I intend to introduce are the sort of steps you need to take now, so that if in 2 years' time we had to ask for exceptional financial support, the government would say, yes, you've done everything you can do to manage your budgets in the time of declining funds from central government, therefore we would be more likely to get that support. If we didn't do things like spending control panels now, they might well turn around in 2 years' time and say, well, you've got to go and do that then. You can't have any extra money then. The circumstances we are in, we are being drained of funds. We are taking the measures we can to deal with that in the limited life we have left as a council. Yes, I totally accept, if reorganisation doesn't happen in 2 or 3 years' time, we are likely to be in, and the cuts to our grant carry on, and there's no leeway on council tax and things like that, we could be in a position in 2 or 3 years' time where we are asking for that support. The alternative is to slash services. But we're trying to protect services either by going to the parishes, or ultimately we'll ask the government for more money under EFS if it came to it in 2 or 3 years' time. But that's the reality we're in. The government is cutting our finances, it's strangling us. It's basically saying to us, the only way forward is to put your fees and charges up, or to take commercial risks to balance your budget going forward. That's already been tried in lots of councils. That's led to 114s where they've taken that too far. That's the context this is in.
Chief Executive is online. Lorna?
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to support what Andrew said there. I think we've been through a really robust process this year with our budget challenge sessions. So we went to every head of service. We asked for proposals for savings. We also looked at the growth that was coming through. We plan to go through that same process next year. We're going to start it in July, so we have more time to consult and understand the impact of some of these choices. But this evening, I've sat and listened to, things being unacceptable on the discretionary side of things. Well, it will be whole services that come forward to make the savings that we're talking about here. I think we also need a discussion about appropriate levels of reserves. It's been at that level at 5, I think it's 5, isn't it, for a very long time now. And knowing that actually it's medium term, we probably have to be concerned about, we might need to have that discussion. But, we are open to ideas on how to make savings. But actually, I think we are getting to the point now where it's not just a little tweak to the budget, it's a fundamental change in the services that we deliver. So I think that might be a discussion for the budget setting process next year. And I do accept that Councillor Barnes makes a good point that we need to fundamentally look at what we do. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. And Councillor McGurk, is that a legacy hand or a fresh hand?
It's a fresh hand. I'm just, sitting here listening to a lot of party political points about the state we're at financially now, because our new government, having been in position for a relatively short period of time, after many years of austerity, and I just want to make the point how onerous that is for me, sitting here listening to that. It's just absolute nonsense that we've suddenly arrived where we are after a few months of authorities, local government have suffered for, for 13 years of reduction in budget and neglect, kicking the can down the road for social care for years and years. We do have we have Louise Casey about to start a review. It might not happen as soon as we would like it to, but she will report, and she may the outcomes of that may be ready to report on an act sooner than scheduled at the moment. So just to make that point, I think it's just become very party political. And unfair when we know the context that we've all been labouring under, whether we're working as officers or as members in local authority.
Yeah, I'll say thanks for the comments. I don't necessarily agree with being partly political here, to be honest. John, I don't want you to come back, John, and have another and go party political.
No, but
if you want to write,
I specifically said this problem has been going on
Yeah.
for 10 years. I'm not blaming the present government. I am not being party political. I just refer you to page 111, which we are budgeting now to actually achieve a reserve, if all goes well, of 18% at the end of the year. You will face this debate again next year because we are not going to be out of the wood next year, and it will be even more acute next year because then, of course, we're faced with reducing the reserves to 10%. I don't know. I sit on a parish council. We keep a 6-month reserve because we know if it goes wrong, you've got to pay off your staff, things like that. I just think we're just popping the problem into next year, as far as we're concerned, and we're assuming that everything is going to go well this year. I think inflation is going to be worse than we're anticipating. I don't see the unions being, I think they're right to want to go back to the NJC, but I think that will cost us money. And I think we're not producing a realistic budget, even in terms of figures. If we can deliver it, the best we can hope for is our reserves go down to 18%. That's the best we can hope for. I think the position will be a lot worse than that. And I'm sorry, I'm just not prepared to be irresponsible.
can you turn your machine off?
Yeah.
Right, well, you've got a proposal that we don't accept the budget. Is that seconded? No. John's put a proposal. He put a proposal in that we do not accept the budget. Basically.
I put it more positively, that we would ask them to look again to try and get the figures more nearly realistic. So are we voting on that?
Go on.
Andrew, is it possible that there are ways, I mean, could we borrow money? I mean, is there any alternative at all?
We can't borrow money as we are. If we were looking at exceptional financial support, that would free up some options. The very interesting one at the minute is there's a lot of councils lobbying the government to put up their council tax by more than the capping limit. So I'm watching that very carefully because that might be a way out in a year or two if they set a precedent, which is what they're going to be scared of doing. But there's obviously a lot of councils in much, much worse financial position as us. And my previous council is asking for a large increase, as many others. And it's been very interesting to see if the government does give way on some of those council tax rises, then there's going to be an avalanche of other authorities next year lobbying for council tax rises, which is another way of funding it. If you get into exceptional financial support, that is about borrowing, which is really kicking the can down the road because you're really storing up problems for the future. You're borrowing to prop up your revenue budget, so we wouldn't want to go there.
Can I also, just because I haven't said much and John said loads, but I just wonder, you've looked carefully, obviously, at every possible opportunity. Mm-hmm. Did you allow any leeway at all? I mean, is it possible that more cuts could be made without affecting services too much?
I think the issue goes back to we've had 15 plus years of cuts. That's the context. So you know, the cupboard is bare, really, unless you want to cut out entire services, stop doing stuff, close all your toilets, etc., things like that. You know, so massive service reduction is the next step of discretionary services.
There has basically been massive increase in the cost of homelessness through no fault of anyone's that has affected us less because of the decisions that we've taken than places like Eastbourne and Hastings. So we haven't been affected as much, but it's still, what's it cost now? 600 grand?
It's more, not more, 2.5 million.
2.5 million. 2.5 million. I can remember when it was 250,000. You know, so it's gone up 10 times. That's just on that, and we've reinvested what 12, 15 million quid more in our own stock. If we hadn't have done that, we would be in a serious trouble. So there it is. Now I've got hands up. So where are we going to? Because John's got a proposal on it. Do you want to reread your proposal? And let's vote and get that one out of the way.
Well, in the end, the Cabinet will be taking the decision. We are recommending to Cabinet. I think that what we should be recommending to Cabinet is that they have a fresh look to see whether there are further cuts that could be made. We originally asked everybody to look at a 10% level. They've achieved roughly a 5% level. I'm sympathetic, but I just think we're leaving a situation where we'll be facing identical debate in 12 months' time with even less room for manoeuvre. And I really do think that every year that we actually rely on reserves to the extent we do, we open ourselves to the possibility of a gale which we're not anticipating. I mean, say we were to have COVID again, we will be absolutely pear-shaped. I just am not prepared to leave it another year, and I don't think the Cabinet should be. But if they do, they must take responsibility for that decision. I'm not prepared to take responsibility for that decision. And therefore, I would ask the Cabinet to think again about whether they can achieve further cuts and, above all, make a realistic provision for inflation and for pay. Because I think otherwise we will find ourselves blown off course without having even planned for it.
Well, what? So these are comments to Cabinet. Comments to Cabinet. And do you have a seconder? For that? Do you have a seconder?
Chairman, I will, just so that we actually do have a vote on this, so I will second it.
Right, well, let's go to a vote then. All those in favour of John's comments that we basically reject this budget, and comment that the Cabinet should set a balanced budget without use of reserves, which would be mission impossible. All those in favour? 2. Those against? Everyone else. That's lost. Right.
One abstains.
Cheryl?
I've got a comment, actually. I can understand John's concerns, I have to say that Andrew's work on this is absolutely exemplary. He's tried to draw blood out of a stone, and I think he got some. I don't want to rubbish what he's produced because it is a good piece of work. Having said that, perhaps we could voice our concerns about the situation he finds himself in, because he hasn't messed this up. He's tried to fix it, and he's got to the point now we're at critical mass. And, you know, I'm not going to make any silly comments like I normally do about stuff, but I have to say this is really, really tricky times. John is quite right. We shouldn't be in this position. We are not an irresponsible council. We have excellent officers who know exactly what they're doing, but the writing is on the wall that we are being basically push until we fall over and nothing can go on. So I think what we need to do is to alert our cabinet colleagues that we are deeply concerned, and not about what has been produced, but the position we find ourselves in. I personally believe that Andrew's gone to extraordinary lengths to try and fix this, but it's like being the little boy in the dam with your finger in it, and it's gone past that. And I don't think there is any decent answer. But I do not want to be unpleasant to people, but this can't go on, and we've got to the point now there is no way out that is reasonable. So I think we need to, rather than be contesting with one another, I think we need to find a way to join together. If it is to the point now that it is unfixable, then I have to see people's faces when I'm speaking, I'm sorry. If it's unfixable, then that's unfortunate. But I've never seen such an effort to try and to do the impossible. Maybe he's got a little rabbit or something, but you know, I did get down that route after all. But I do believe that I don't want to be contentious, but in actual fact, John is right. But we need to find a way that is going to be productive rather than divisive to get that across. And I really don't know the answer to that, if I'm going to be absolutely honest. I realise there's a problem, but I don't know how the solution's going to fix. And my piggy bank hasn't got enough in it to help. So thank you.
Right, I've got a number of councillors who want to speak. I'm just aware of the time, it's 8:45. So I've been here since 2:30 this afternoon, and the officers have probably been here since 8 o'clock. So I'm going to go Councillor Byrne.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to move that the committee accept this budget on the grounds that we believe that it strikes the best possible balance between preserving our reserves and preserving services. And I think we trust that our officers have done the best they possibly can, and the whole senior management team has done the best it possibly can to do that, to preserve reserves and to preserve services. It's a balance, and my only point of issue with Councillor Barnes is whether it's glass half full, glass half empty. He knows a lot more about local government finance than I do. However, I'm a bit more optimistic about the possible finances going down the track and the way the devolution will work. So basically, I would like to move that we recommend this budget on the grounds that we believe the current budget represents a proper balance between preserving reserves and preserving services. So that's what I would like to move, please.
And Councillor Legg.
Thank you, Chair. I wanted really just to move that we recommend this to the Cabinet, but with the amendments to the car parking charges.
I think Lisa just about took that out of my ear before I mentioned it. Chairman of Council, Councillor Tom.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, I think we need to appreciate the tremendous efforts that have been made to make this budget work. And I think people may underestimate the extent to which there are positive sides to this budget, sides where things that councillors want, that the public want, are included in the budget by a wise use of the money we're getting from the government in doubling up funds, etc. So there's some very key things that I think people around this room will be pleased to see, actually, which are also in the budget. For example, the Beeching Road Hotel and food store scheme is still in there. It's on the basis of money coming in from outside. The toilet scheme in Edgerton Park, which has been passed backwards and forwards like a parcel nobody wants to actually be left holding, that's in it. And that's a very good thing, which I think the public will be pleased about. We'd said about toilets, that's good news. There are also going to be improvements to the existing Betsall Leisure Centre. That is obviously not what I would ideally want, but if we haven't got the money, it's still a way forward in relation to that very contentious issue. We're going to do something about waste vehicles, and that I think we wanted to see the waste vehicles using more environmentally friendly fuels. So that's another good measure. So there are various things in this budget. It's a prudent budget, but it's also a positive budget, and therefore I think the committee should endorse it.
Okay, well, with that, I think I'll go to the vote. So, all those in favour of Councillor Burns' motion, seconded by Councillor Legg, in that we accept the budget, recommend to Cabinet, we accept the budget, but with the caveats that work needs to be looked at, and the car parks. Okay, all in favour? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, that's carried. Any against? 1, 2, I'm abstaining. Right, okay, thank you very much. Right, item 9.
Could I possibly, could it be known that John and I both voted against it? Yeah.
Item 9, provide an update on revenue and capital budgets as at 30th of November 2024, including an update on progress at achieving revenue savings. Andrew.
Okay, I'll be very brief given the time. The position has worsened slightly since month 5, but the areas of overspend are very similar. So it's things like lack of planning fees, car park income down because of the weather, homelessness, as we've already discussed. We've taken account of all those measures where relevant in the new budget, just to reassure people. So the car park income and things have been adjusted in the new budget. Homelessness has been adjusted in the new budget, as we've already discussed. Planning things, we are expecting, Gillian is expecting things to turn around, so there are actually increases in planning fees, and the government's allowing us to increase fee, or mandating that we increase fees as well. So all the factors in the monitoring have been taken into account one way or the other in the budget report, just to reassure members of that. So really the main issue is the savings, and paragraph 4 and appendix C lists those. And as you would expect, as we get towards the end of the financial year, where we had a lot of amber in previous reports, they are now either going green or red, depending on whether they're going to be made or not, as we have more knowledge towards the end of the year. So 1.8 million of the savings of the 2.5 are rated green, and about 600 red, and now just a very small amount amber, uncertain in the middle. We've already spoke really about the effect that this will have on the reserves as part of the budget paper.
One positive thing, Canberra was extremely busy on Sunday. Excellent. Whether anyone paid or not is another thing, but it was, Central Car Park was pretty busy, and there were even people in Western Car Park. So it surprised me because it was a foggy, cold, horrible, miserable day, but there it is. Things people do for a day out. Second homes, 100% increase.
That's in the budget.
That's in the budget, coming in April. So, anybody got any points, or have we all had enough now? I think we've had enough. Someone what's the recommendation?
Review the report, make any recommendations to Cabinet.
Provide an update, revenue and capital budgets, including an update on progress in achieving revenue savings. Committee reviews report, makes any recommendations to Cabinet. Any recommendations to Cabinet? Just keep working on it, basically. Yep.
Can we congratulate the officers on what they've done on capital program?
Yep.
It deserves recognition.
Yep. Okay, someone want to move that? Councillor Cook? Oh, Councillor Clark in first for a move it. Councillor Cook on a second.
Happy to second, Chair.
Thank you very much. All those in favour? Thank Thank you very much. It's carried unanimously. Last item, item 10, work programme. That one's gone. So next meeting is the 17th of March, Crime and Disorder Committee. Performance report, third quarter, revenue budget, savings assurance programme, reasonable adjustments policy for tenants or RDC in RDC properties, and before that we have a Zoom call. We have a Teams meeting, don't we, Lisa? Can you remind me of the date?
Yes, Chair, we've got an informal meeting on the 10th of February to discuss the size of committee going forward and frequency of meetings, whether they're formal or informal.
Yeah, if you'll remember, I brought this up at full council. So the idea is to reduce us in number by 3 or 4 members, I think it is, and do 2 meetings via Teams, which are non-decision-making meetings. But we'll have a meeting via Teams and see what we want to do, and then we can go forward on that. Okay, so with that, and a low battery warning coming on the iPad, I reckon that's time to quit. So thank you very much for your time this evening. I declare the meeting closed at 7 minutes to 9. Thank you very much for your attendance. Thank you very much to those online, and good evening, everybody.
Thank you very much indeed.